At 1 p.m., October 21st, 2025, and we're honored to be gathered on the traditional territories of the Skokomish Nation. First, we need to approve the agenda. I've only got 2 votes. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor DeAndrade, and I don't think anyone's joining us online, right, from Council? Yeah. Okay, all those in favor? The motion carries. And adoption of minutes, we have a recommendation to adopt the minutes for the October 7th, 2025 special council meeting. It's item 3.1, moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor DeAndrade. All those in favor? That motion carries. And now right to 4.1, our report on zoning bylaw public engagement summary and a new zoning direction from our Director of Planning and Development.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have Colton Kersop online with a presentation of the What We Heard report and what we're recommending for changes to the zoning bylaw.
Thanks, Ms. Stats. I'll get my screen sharing going and we'll get this show on the road. Okay. Can you see my title screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And it sounds like you can hear me. So my name is Colton Kersop. I'm a division manager at McElhaney, and I'll be presenting a short presentation on the engagement summary and then what we propose to do to respond to some of the comments that we received. So the first part of the presentation will cover what I just mentioned, the engagement summary. The second part will address what we're proposing to change to address some of the feedback received. And then we'll cover off some potential next steps in the project. So first step was to build awareness of the opportunity to participate in this process. Certainly through the OCP engagement, which there was quite a bit of, we took pains to make sure people were aware that this would connect to a zoning bylaw and a proposed process for input on that. We then made sure that we were gathering public feedback on that draft zoning bylaw, and participants were welcome to provide feedback to help us refine the draft bylaw. And that's really a lot of what we'll be discussing today is some proposed refinements responding to a lot of the feedback that we received. Data collection activities included an online survey, conversations and written comments provided by residents and businesses at in-person pop-up events, and comments and feedback submitted by email either to project staff or through the project website portal. There was a sort of a special email address set up for the project, and also to elected officials, which were then passed on to the project team. So in terms of our engagement by the numbers, we held a 14-day engagement period specific to the zoning bylaw. There was 8 hours of staff time across multiple staff members, so that number really should be higher in terms of direct community engagement with residents. There were 2,200 postcards distributed in the community to promote awareness about the project, as well as 7 social media posts to promote the opportunities and to raise awareness that, you know, the team would be at various different locations in the town at different times of day. Both daytime and evening opportunities were provided. There were 73 online survey submissions received and over 50 email submissions received on the zoning bylaw update. We estimate that approximately over 100 people were engaged at those in-person events, and this is really indicative that there was interest and there was awareness in the project. In terms of what we heard, we certainly heard that there was appreciation from members of the public that some changes were made to the draft OCP map because we showed them both the OCP map and the zoning map, and there were some changes on that OCP map that were warmly received. That certainly included the redesignation of the Sharman lands to conservation and open space, and also some changes to a medium density designation of what were previously proposed as high density sites in the Parkland neighborhood. There was also an appreciation for keeping some industrial zoning in Upper Gibsons, and so a number of changes showed up on that map for the OCP and the zoning bylaw, demonstrating that there is definitely industrial land use designations and zoning paired to match, and the word industrial shows up in those designations now to avoid any confusion about the omission of that. There was also support for more parks and green space to balance increased density, contribute to livability, and provide opportunities for both recreation and conservation, such as the urban forest. Respondents did identify Lower Gibsons as a key location for ensuring a balanced supply of parking, and I know that's a subsequent agenda item today, so we'll look forward to that conversation. And there was also an emphasis on the importance of view preservation and some comments around heights. When it came to the residential zones, there was a low level of support with only 32% of respondents indicating strong support or somewhat support the updated residential zones. When we dove into that, into the comments and sorted through the data, we realized that most of that was related to some site-specific issues and use-specific issues, not necessarily wholesale concerns with all of the residential zones that were proposed. The key themes there included 12 responses noting concerns with the proposed zoning of the Devlin's funeral home site. We both received objections and support for its continued presence or not in the town of Gibson. So we have some proposed solutions that we'll address later on. And we also had 12 respondents noting concerns with proposed density and building height increases. When it came to commercial zones, the level of support was somewhat higher, but it was only 43%, either indicating strong or somewhat supporting the updated zones. And again, when we delved into the comments and sorted through the data, we identified again that there were some specific site-specific concerns that were really driving that response. And so 7 comments focused on the industrial commercial zone, requesting separation from either the ALR or low-density residential. And there were 3 comments recommending lower height in the mixed-use commercial zone to preserve neighborhood character or sunlight exposure. When it came to the institutional and agricultural zones, support was much higher, with over 57% of respondents either strongly supporting or somewhat supporting the updated zones. And the common themes in the comments were 8 comments supporting the addition of more parks throughout the town to balance density and preserve surrounding forests. There was a question in the survey on parking availability, and the common themes there, and it was an open-ended comment, so there's no pie chart or levels of support because we were waiting for a bit of the parking study to advance to provide some of the recommendations. So as an open-ended question, 15 comments identified Lower Gibsons as a key location for ensuring a consistent supply of parking and to reduce traffic congestion and accommodate the seasonal influx of tourists. There were 11 comments expressing an interest in maintaining the current supply of parking or adding more parking to ensure that there is accessible and reliable parking options for those residents and visitors. And then there were 3 comments that recommended parking requirements remain in place. I think you could interpret that as the same as they currently are until investments are made in active transportation and a well-connected public transit system. We also ask about view protection areas and which views are important to consider in Gibsons, and we received 18 comments that emphasized the importance of view protection and concerns with the potential impact of building heights in both Lower and Upper Gibsons. We received 4 comments emphasizing the need for equal consideration of protected views in both Lower and Upper Gibsons, and some participants provided specific viewpoints for protection, including views of Keats Island, views of the ocean from the Bluff, Heritage Hill, from Town Hall and along School Road, South Fletcher Road, Seaview Road, and Ocean Mount Boulevard. So before I transition into what we propose to do to address some of these comments, just wanted to highlight that this was the point of the engagement, was really to put a draft out there and to get feedback from residents, from council, and work through some revisions to the proposed zoning bylaw. So those updates we will begin to process from today going forward. And there really will also be an effort to make sure that the new zoning bylaw and the OCP are aligned. So I'm just highlighting now that if there's some additional changes in zoning, there might be some changes back to the OCP map because we're trying to make efforts to make sure that they are both aligned as we move forward. So the second part of the presentation begins now, and I'm really going to focus on sort of the higher level big picture items that were raised in the presentation, but the full list of proposed changes or why we're not making a change are contained in attachment B to the staff report on this item. So just to recap, when we think about what we heard on the residential zones, we had the concerns about proposed increases in density or building height. We had some concerns about the proposed rezoning of Devlin's funeral home to RL1. And we had concerns about development companies specifically expressing feedback where either existing uses wouldn't be permitted or existing development rights might be reduced, or we had feedback that they'd like more. We also had requests about wanting additional certainty about how many units exactly could be provided on various development sites. So in terms of what we...
Could I interrupt you because I'm just really confused about some specific terminology on that slide. The concerns from development companies. Aren't we talking more about existing property owners? Like when I read the phrase development companies, I think somebody who's looking to develop a site for a new use. But
I suppose I could clarify, Mr. Mayor. I would, if I was to rephrase that, I would suggest that they were privately owned by. It was feedback provided by corporate entities
who want to maintain the existing use, not redevelop or change it due to pursue development.
Yeah, they were either.
Okay, I just want to clarify that because it's
okay.
been confusing me and probably others. Okay, thanks.
So what we propose to change is to provide some comfort around height and density in both RL1 and RL2. We propose some changes. In RL1, there is a proposal here for basically a reduced height in the back portion of the lot. And so the metrics are on the slide there for the portion of the lot. The back 7.5 meters of the lot, the maximum building height would only be 4.5 meters. So the intent of that is that you're not going to get a long, tall building across the whole lot. You're only going to have the height focused in the front half of the lot, or maybe it's not half, but it's certainly not going to go all the way to the back. It's going to be lower in the back 7.5 meters. And the maximum building height for that zone is proposed to be 8.5 meters. In the RL2 zone, the portion of the back 7.5 meters of the lot, the maximum building height would be 6 meters. And for the rest of the lot, the maximum building height would be 11 meters. So again, this is aiming to bring down the massing and overlook in the backyard. And then on the Devlin's funeral home site, we're proposing that it be zoned as PI or civic institutional to accommodate the funeral home use, and the crematorium use would become legal non-conforming to encourage relocation into a more appropriate location, such as an industrial zoned location. The other changes are shown here. So we are now providing maximum densities using a dwelling unit per hectare measure. It will be rounded down to the nearest whole number, so you won't have a situation where people are looking to round up because the bylaw is being clear that we're going to round down to the nearest whole number. And so this will provide more clarity about what the actual maximum intensity could be in terms of dwelling units. And we are allowing the opportunity for achieving a higher number of dwelling units per hectare if a housing agreement is in place. And that is limited to some of the more intense or medium and high density residential zones. There's a couple of site-specific changes mentioned here. So 718 North Road, as the council report notes, there's already an approved development on this site, and so we're proposing to change it to high density to really bring the zoning into alignment with what's already been approved on that location. So that would be changing to high density from medium density. And I will go through a map that shows all of these changes to help you visualize it as well. At 528 Marine Drive and other sites along Marine Drive, we're proposing to introduce a new zone called RL3 Low Density Residential Waterfront to address the unique challenges of waterfront development. Because as you know, there's a steep grade along Marine Drive, and there's also a very clear interest in retaining the opportunity for views out to the ocean. And it will accomplish that by having a maximum height of 4.5 meters fronting onto Marine Drive, but then allowing for the opportunity of those taller building heights because of the slope of the site. And then at 758 School Road, we had a request for high density residential. And as we move through the presentation today, we're suggesting that what we should do here is actually model what that might look like and what the impact might look like, and bring some options back to council at a future council meeting. In terms of the commercial zones, what we heard was a recognition of the importance of careful planning near the ALR and low density residential neighborhoods. We also heard concerns about the proposed height in the mixed use commercial zone. And we're not recommending any changes as a result of this feedback because there's extensive development permit area guidelines in place. In Upper Gibsons, there's an Upper Gibsons commercial DPA in the OCP, which provides additional design guidelines, and that has the checks and balances to prevent negative externalities. And it are also the additional potential requirements for environmental site assessments, and many other tools in the development permit areas to manage development in those areas. In terms of institutional and agricultural zones, we heard again, just to reiterate or recap, a desire to see an increase in park and green space throughout the town to balance higher density, enhance livability, and preserve the urban forest. And respondents also suggested that the Charmin lands be zoned solely for conservation to restrict all forms of development. And so what we have changed is the boundary of the conservation and open space zone on the Charmin lands will be adjusted to really follow the setback from Charmin Creek. So the next version of the zoning map would show an increase in the net area of the conservation and open space zone and a reduction of the park designation to follow the line of the creek, and will also show a reduction in the civic and institutional designation just south of the water treatment plant. There's an opportunity to put more of that into the conservation zone, also following the creek. Something that didn't make it onto the slide is we've also received some feedback about concepts like minimum planted area to help attain urban forestry objectives. And so that content is being worked on, isn't finalized yet, but I just wanted to provide some assurance that we're looking at opportunities to address this through additional regulations in the draft zoning bylaw. In terms of parking, that's the next agenda item for you today, I believe. So we heard feedback about maintaining existing parking regulations. We heard feedback about increasing parking in Lower Gibsons. And we heard an interest in advancing active transportation and public transit as a means of potentially attaining reduced parking requirements. And so we're really looking to that council item to provide some guidance on the parking rates that will be plugged into the zoning bylaw. So here's the slide on the map changes, and just to bring, I guess, clarity, the site we're proposing to switch from medium density to high density residential is 718 North Road. The Devlin's Funeral Home site is proposed to be designated civic institutional in blue to allow the funeral home to operate, but the crematorium aspect would become non-conforming. And then the new RL3 residential zone is difficult to see, but it's this olive green strip here, and then it continues along Marine Drive to cover those steeply sloped sites. And we're adding a significant band of parks and recreation zone along the full length of the waterfront, coming around the bluff and back up to Armourers Beach. And then when it comes to views, we've definitely heard probably the most feedback about views and questions about height. And so what we think we can do is use a 3D model to share the proposed zoning, and we can compare and contrast it to the existing zoning. And this can be used to evaluate and communicate changes in height and the effect on key public views. And so if council wishes, they could hold a special meeting on this issue to share information and to provide direction on some options which would be presented at that time. In terms of next steps, it would be potentially to present that view modeling and analysis at a future meeting. And I just wanted to also highlight there will be two windows of opportunity for us to make revisions to the draft bylaws. And that's subsequent to today. So there's really sort of after today, there's after that view meeting, and then we would prepare the official community plan and zoning bylaw for first reading, initiate the referral process, and schedule a public hearing for sometime in December. And then there's another opportunity for a round of revisions to respond to feedback from the public hearing, and then bring it through the approvals and adoption process. So that completes my presentation. I would be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Colton. I'm sure council, as represented today, has some questions, and I will just start things off with a couple. I've got more than that, but I guess one was something this process has certainly illuminated to me, is that although the general consensus from the community and feedback early on, whether it be from the Residents' Assembly or early on to the OCP, was generally let's look at more density and height in Upper Gibsons and try to preserve and maintain small town community character in Lower Gibsons as much as possible. It seems what we've ended up with is, there's also the piece to this too, which perhaps our planning staff can communicate or comment on too, that we do need to implement Bill 33. That's legal. That's a law. 44. I mean, yeah. I think in public education or something. I'm going back to my previous life. Bill 44. But what this is uncovering, I think, is that I guess in some places we haven't really done a minimum of those of the Bill 44 implementation in Lower Gibsons, where we actually are being I won't say ambitious. I'm not sure. Maybe we could have been more ambitious, but we are in some zones. I guess that would be RL2 really trying to seek more density than would be the minimum of Bill 44. Is that correct? And if so, why? Because I think those are the questions a lot of community members are coming to us, and I think they're right. Like that wasn't the general feel that the community communicated early in the process.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. I'm just putting up the proposed zoning map just to sort of highlight that as the project has evolved, we've certainly brought forward a proposal for a lower density and intensity residential zone on Heritage Hill. We have ended up with a lower intensity version of medium density for Lower Gibsons, and the same goes for the commercial mixed use zones. So I think there's definitely been some movement towards making sure that there's that smaller scale community retained in Lower Gibsons, and we can continue to investigate, whether or not the RL2 low density zone is achieving what it needs to in the community's eyes. And I think that's where the 3D model can help us, is to sort of allow us that opportunity to be clear about what's proposed and provide some options if it's being perceived as too intense. But true to your point there, Mr. Mayor, the bill is certainly also driving some of this, but if there's a desire to sort of double check the work here and see whether or not things are too intense in Lower Gibsons, we can definitely respond to that with some options.
Yeah, I think you'll probably be hearing that from other councillors here today. I know it's just been I'll go to our staff on this topic too.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add to what Colton said, we did look at the provincial guideline document. So they released a policy document for BC local governments to implement small-scale multi-unit housing, so to implement Bill 44, and we use that as a base. So that was basically the starting point, which was the 11-meter height, the density differences based on lot size. And so that's where it started. And now we've been tweaking it based on topography or view corridors. And once we analyze the 3D model, that's where we can tweak it a little bit more.
Yeah, I've still got a piece related to this on view protection, but I'll go to Councillor Thompson on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just like some clarity on Bill 44 and height. My understanding,
You won't be getting it from me, but I'll delegate it because I find this really confusing myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
the 11-meter default,
Yeah.
is that a Bill 44 requirement, or is it up to the municipality? I'd just like a confirmation on that, please.
Great question.
I can answer that through the mayor. That is not a Bill 44 requirement. So that came out of their policy document with recommended zoning. They released a document with recommendations on maximum building height, setbacks, parking requirements, and so forth. So that's where the 11 meters came from, but that can be tweaked.
Yeah, I think we are really interested in that being tweaked. It's interesting because I think Burnaby probably went above that and implemented theirs a while ago, and now these buildings are actually being built, and they're more like 4 stories rather than 3, I believe, in what I've read. And there's a lot of pushback, and now that I think even members of council and who approved that, thinking it was a good idea to, I guess, follow what the province is generally pushing, they're now turning away from that and saying this was a mistake. So I don't let's learn from that because we have a different character and general density in our community, and we're not to Burnaby scale, we're to Gibson scale, and I think people want to maintain that. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also, and I'm sure my fellow councillors have had the same experience, had a lot of outreach on height. And one thing that I would request is that we, in that tweaking, we have a comparison to what is existing to what's being proposed, and just have some clarity on that, because there's a lot of assumption that low density is, yay, we're going to stay the same. And that's not exactly what is being proposed here. So I think that would be a benefit as well if there was some real clarity in the comparison. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I guess the zone for Heritage Hills has really been something that has been interesting to me. And because I think when we first set out some direction on that, it was just the idea that we wanted a kind of more of a check on form and character in Heritage Hills, being concerned about the look of the homes there, the form part, or the character part especially. But the fact that we have been able to have smaller heights and more kind of keeping with smaller town character there, and yet still implementing Bill 44, that seems to be desirable to other neighborhoods in the community as well, understandably, because it's people like Gibsons the way it is, and a lot of these neighborhoods that we live in. But I mean, obviously, beyond even the desire for higher density in Upper Gibsons, there's also a support in our community for more housing. There's always been support for. I mean, we were fairly early on in officially accepting secondary suites in Gibsons. I remember years and years ago when I first lived here, and then implementing the garden suite program. There's always been interest and support for gentle density. So let's keep it. I think people are supportive of Bill 44, but also keeping with our community character. I've got Councillor DeAndrade. But Colton, did you have a response there too?
Yeah, Mayor White, through you, I can certainly respond to Councillor Thompson's request. Absolutely, our intent is to bring forward a model that can show both the proposed and the existing heights, and we'll also make sure to do that in table form, so it's clear to those viewing in either method what is before them now and what is a potential future height. So yeah, we'll make sure that clarity is available.
Thank you. Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I appreciate where this conversation is going, because in particular, I felt that Heritage Hill was being treated, especially while the other low residential, doesn't matter, we can go high. And it's not only about views, but it's also about sunlight and privacy and many other issues, whether parking, infrastructure, and I think this should all be considered. And Mayor, I understand that we will do a visual to understand where this is going, but at the same time, I feel in a way very puzzled with the water capacity, and I would like to speak about that, if I may. Waterline, which is our expert, says clearly in the last two reports that has a span of 10 years that based on our water consumption, which is right now 425 liters per person per day, we have a capacity of 10,000. So based on Metro Vancouver goals for 2055, which is a 300,000 liters per person, which is a reduction of 30%. So if we manage to reach the 300, this would allow a population density of 13,000 people. My understanding is based on the current zoning, if everything is built, we would pass that. So I would like to know if we are going to do some sort of analysis. And I heard over these last 7 years, a lot of conversation, we can. But to me, especially have a scientific background, I want scientific data. Waterline tells in their report the 10,000 max, and I accept the 13,000 if we reach a reduction of 30%. But just accept whether staff, and this is all respect, Mayor, to you, to all councilors and all the staff, I cannot accept just verbal claims that we will be there, that's gonna be okay. And since the OCP, it's a 20 years window, so I don't understand how we plan for this higher density that would probably be double of the population at full build-out without even talking about that.
Okay, so Councillor DeAndretti, I would start by saying I don't know where you're getting your information from, but I actually do know where you're getting your misinformation from. And it's not accurate that Waterline has said that we only have capacity for 10,000. We've gone over this answer many, many times before from our staff. We have reports that also say this. What Waterline does in their aquifer mapping is that they first look at what our population projections are, which have been 10,000. We set that, we ask them, and we say, can you do a test to see if the aquifer can support 10,000? And they do that, and the answer both times has been yes. And we have, it's never been, can you determine what the maximum capacity is? So I know that there's a couple people in our community who have been distorting this data and miscommunicating it on purpose. And I really think that at our council table, we need to support our staff, support the good work Waterline has done for our community, and communicate that this kind of misinformation is unacceptable, it's misleading, and it shouldn't be something that we base our decision-making on. And I'll start with that, and we've done this many times, but I know that our Director of Infrastructure would probably appreciate the opportunity to speak factually on this.
Thank you, Mayor White. I think the only thing that I would add to that is, aside from echoing that, yes, they've answered the question in front of them, which is, can the aquifer support a population of 10,000? The answer being yes. With the update to the OCP, we have intentions of updating our water strategic plan. Part of that plan will include a assessment of the projected population and determining what steps need to be taken to confirm that the aquifer can support that population. So it's not that we have been silent in the conversation, it's just that until the OCP is done, the next step must follow the OCP update. Now we have a future population build-out that we can assess and plan towards. And so that will be the next step from our department in terms of updating our water supply strategy is with the updated OCP, we look at what we have available for data from our existing well network, and if we need to complete any additional testing to confirm capacity beyond what we can get out of the well network that we have right now, we plan that out and we'll undertake those well tests in the future.
Yeah, and to add to that too, I mean, something I've tried to communicate over the years as well, and I think most people in our community accept it and support it and understand it, and that's that the town of Gibsons has been a real leader on water monitoring and water source monitoring and aquifer mapping, and we hear this every time. Again, when we went to UBCM in September, we hear this from the rest of the province and going, wow, that's like what's going on in the town is what every community should strive for, let alone a small community. And we can see it, I'm not going to point fingers, but we can see it just looking around us that generally, unfortunately, and it's a reason why there's so much work being done and concern about droughts and watershed management and water security, is that a lot of communities don't have that kind of guide and bearing that we do on our water source and water capacity. And Yeah, we do see it right next door. And we do see it right next door when it comes to Metro Vancouver even, which I read an article in the paper that I've shared around. Manny and I certainly talked about it, that says Metro Vancouver has definitely got concerns for their water sources coming up. And so again, I think we have nothing but, we should have nothing but praise and respect for the amount of work that's been done by consultants and staff here in the town for years on monitoring water and making sure that we have enough water for growth. Right now, when it comes to the growth side of things too, where the growth has been very modest. Nobody's expecting there to be 10,000 people anytime in the near future. And we should keep celebrating that work and promoting that work rather than disparaging it. Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, just I think it's important to even correct. You mentioned that is a not misinterpretation, a misinformation. But the reality, we don't have. So thank you for clarifying. We do not have any data saying that we can support more. We have the data that right now, and I acknowledge all the efforts the town has done in monitoring. I know we are leaders, but so in a way, we are doing the opposite. We are projecting a population that's going to be over 20,000 with the new proposed, hopefully not, and then we will find if we have water. So my question is, I don't know when, which I find, I don't know if this will be on the OCP, because to me it's misleading. If this is not in the OCP, it's misleading, even for investors, because we are projecting, instead of projecting population and getting water line, at least to give us some assurance, even though in their report, on the one water strategy report that's coming soon, they talk about of potential decrease in groundwater replacement because of the drought, many aquifers. So we are, and we talk about climate change, we are all invested in resilience. So aquifer resilience is a key thing. So to say that residents, including a councillor here, that from day one, that has been my concern. Until Waterline or any other consulting firm affirms that we do have that capacity, it is a concern. So, and then I think it's in a way, Mayor, very offensive to people who read all the papers produced by the town, including myself, and don't find this information. And it's new that I heard from staff saying right now that they will do the projection, but right now we do not have. So I just want to clarify that. We do not have the data.
That's been the process for this town for all the time I've been here, like over a decade, which is like the aquifer mapping happened before I got here, actually. Is that what the process that the way we work with Waterline, the way we work with our professionals, is that we have a growth that's anticipated in the OCP, and then Waterline checks the water source to maps the water source to analyze capacity. And I'll repeat that it's most definitely 100% misinformation to say that Waterline has said that we only have capacity for 10,000. Director of Infrastructure Services.
Thank you. If I may too, there's a bit of context that might be worth sharing in this conversation. So in recent years, you could look at the supply of groundwater that the regional district was getting out of the SOMS portion of Aquifer 560 and say that it's only able to produce 15 liters a second, because that's all they were able to confirm through testing. They went through a process of drilling additional test wells, and lo and behold, they can produce 60 liters a second out of that. Same in Langdale, they had a well there that would produce 17 liters a second. You could argue that that's all, and they would, if there was a report from a hydrogeologist, that report would have said that this well could, or this aquifer can support a population of whatever you can get out of 17 liters a second. They drilled additional wells there, and lo and behold, they can get, their assumptions are in the range of over 100 liters a second. So the scientists that produce these reports, they can't say what it can do based on projections and assumptions of what it will do until they have the data to back it. And so it's easy for somebody who isn't a scientist to read something and say, this is saying it can only do this, when it's saying is we can only guarantee through data that we've collected that this is what it can do, even though they may say, yeah, we have no doubt that it can produce way more, but they haven't completed the testing yet. So I can say here confidently that the town can support growth beyond 10,000 people. We just haven't gathered that data yet. And we will as part of the next step in our water supply strategy once the OCP update is complete and we have some planning horizon targets. So that's the process that we go through. It's hard for us to just say, well, what's the maximum amount? Because there's no limit to the amount of test wells that you could drill to kind of verify that data. So for us to have a reasonable program that we can roll out to confirm capacity, I don't see there being much benefit in the town right now investing money to confirm whether the limit is 15,000 or 18,000 or 23,000 when our current population isn't even 5. So there's so much time ahead of us to refine that data, technological advances that may help us continue to reduce our consumption. That 423 per capita, we're under that. Every year that I've been here, the per capita consumption has gone down a little bit and a little bit, and that is a consistent pattern since universal metering was implemented more than a decade ago. So we have confidence that we have, with the data that we have right now, that we know that the town can continue to grow beyond that 10,000 horizon. That 10,000 population was a target that was given to them, and that was the answer that they provided.
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a little bit more context, just for perspective. At the moment, we have to have the data and the projections, the population projections, to apply to the province for a license. So we have a license for 1.1 million cubic meters a year. We've been consistently using in the neighborhood of 740,000 liters. Cubic meters, I should say. Even in the middle of summer, we stay well below our license and well below our capacity to pump out of the ground, and that's for the population we have. So we're barely using, 60% of our license. If we can't get more confirmed access to water until we have the population to show that we have the need. So you can't protect future water. But within what we're able to see, we have we have the data, which is what we rely. We have more data than any other aquifer in BC, hands down, I would say. We have very restricted operational guidelines for the use of the water, and in the one water report, that slower response in recovering. It's still well within a very conservative approach to it. We're just being upfront about the nuances, very small variations, but it's there. Anybody can see that data. So the province and the scientists that are looking at it, the consultants, were kind of somewhat slow and steady, but we have zero concerns about our ability to service our current population, including all the approvals the council has done, and for our future population as well. But the data itself, it's what ultimately will prove that. But we can't get more license unless we have the population in the data. So,
Thank you. I wanted to ask about getting back to the zoning bylaw. I'm glad we had that discussion. Now, the view protection piece of things in the process. And this is in consideration too for the fact that, I think we're already hearing that there's an understanding that some tweaking needs to be done. And I guess part of it too is we've had some feedback from people that they didn't receive their cards until, and it might have just been when they checked their mail or the mail got hung up. And unfortunately, the mail strike has been, and I've heard other public processes around the whole country being affected by the mail strike, unfortunately. Is there any kind of, considering that a lot of people are concerned about the view protection piece, how is public engagement going to look for that step of things? Are we, I mean, I know we're always open to receiving emails from people. We may not have the open houses and parts to that, but how are we anticipating public engagement to go for the rest of this, especially as we release some of the view protection modeling that's going to be very interesting to the public? I mean, I feel like a lot of the people who are already really engaged and concerned are probably going to continue to be. So I anticipate that they'll be following along and sending us their feedback to what they see to the changes we are making even today, and then to when we get to those steps. So I just want to make sure that we're going to continue to be open to that and communicating that we're open to that.
Thank you, Mayor. So we hadn't planned any more public engagement pop-ups or any additional public engagement process. We have been working with our communications coordinator to put a blurb in the next newsletter that's going out to let people know that on November 4th, we will be presenting the view analysis. And then the next step after that would be the public hearing. So we could get creative with ways to share this information or push it out, but we didn't have a plan for any public engagement campaign. So it would be more on the information sharing approach, informing the public that this is happening. And then through the public hearing, that's when our council would get feedback on it.
I just think, yeah, I'm glad that we're already talking to our communications coordinator about that and doing everything we can internally without having the resourcing for these, more open houses in order to accommodate people's concerns, especially considering, we are getting I don't know how many cards ended up being late, but some apparently didn't show up until after the period, unfortunately. So I think we definitely need to be accommodating to those people who still want to provide us some input. Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you. I talked to many people, they haven't even seen the card, whether the card went through the garbage with all the other mails. But what I'm saying is, many people are not aware. So is it possible, I can see the second and third reading are together. I'm just wondering, given that many people would only be able to provide feedback because once we do the public hearing, there will be advertised on the newspaper, plus the email sent to people. I think that will be, and then the people who already know, they would be following up. So my concern is that we are putting second and third reading. I'd rather have second reading, and if everything goes well, yeah.
Exactly, I can respond. I mean, that'll always be to the discretion of council. I mean,
No, exactly.
council could decide to defeat a reading even, right? Like that's always a possibility. So that'll be to the discretion of council. That's our schedule right now. And then, I mean, I kind of if we hit second reading and go, well, there's still a lot of input out there that we feel we haven't had a chance to integrate, like maybe we'll have to delay things further. But I think as the schedule is set out there was still a lot of, as Colton said, there's still a lot of spaces to continue to make changes. So I think we should just go ahead with the schedule as is, and we're already, we've heard that there's some further tweaks being considered from the input that's been received, and if we kind of hit that point and feel like we're not there yet for council to be ready to support a third reading, then we might need to space it out further. So thanks for bringing that up. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. And that would also include the recommendation, Colton, you had mentioned the special meeting on views with the modeling analysis. Is that something that we are going to be moving forward with. And I have a follow-up to that, which is in my notes here, there was a question also brought up in your report, a certainty of max development density number of units. Is that going to be addressed as well, too, moving forward? How would that be addressed? Those are my two questions.
Yes, so Councillor Thompson, through the chair, I can speak to that a little bit. What we've done in the draft is introduce maximum number of dwellings per hectare. What that would enable us to do for information sharing purposes is produce calculations. If a particular resident is curious, like, what does this mean on this site? We can run that number very quickly. We could potentially work with administration on making that information available. But it is in the new draft, and I think that there's also, as a part of moving towards a meeting and getting public awareness and information sharing happening, I think one of the methods that would probably be helpful is to be transparent, and is to provide this information on the project website ahead of or in conjunction with the council meeting, so it's not buried in sort of the agenda package process. I think we can support staff if there's a desire to do that. And then when it comes to modeling, as I've said, we're already working towards being able to present very clearly existing limits and proposed limits, and then also provide you with some options so that there are suggestions already, so to speak, on the table about what you may or may not want to do with respect to a particular height limit in a particular zone or in a particular location. And we'll also share view, like snapshots from the model that show, how much of the view is still visible with the proposed zoning, and if we make a change to one of the alternative options, what are the beneficial outcomes of that?
Thank you. I think that's excellent. And I just wanted to add as well to that there was such positive feedback from the community members that I've met in regards to our planning department and the attention that was given to the public. It was everybody, I think it's compounding questions. It's not that their questions aren't being answered, because everybody has said that, meeting on the street and everything, that it was a great experience. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. And I've got a few specifics I want to ask about too, but go Councillor D'Andretti.
Thank you, Mayor. Just going back to low residential R2, I will, because I heard the word tweak, and I don't know what it means really, if it's just half meter, but I would like, at least from what I'm hearing, the same treatment as Heritage Hills. Yeah, in their case is the view, but for other residential are views as well, but are other, maybe some residential areas don't have the view, but we have views of trees. We have some low residential areas are close to creeks, so you have even wildlife, so density would impact as well. We talk about preserving biodiversity. So I would like to be very comparative, the low residential areas, because otherwise I think in a way there will be some discrimination. I understand certain aspect of high density. Yeah, we don't want super tall buildings in Lower Gibsons, and on the corridors it's acceptable, but the low residential areas are not in corridors. And even as you mentioned, Mayor, all the things we have done until today, it's allowing density. If we were in ground zero, like we haven't done any garden suites, any secondary suites, I get it. But we have been doing really well in allowing. So I would like to keep the height like practically what it is, or a very small height, like 8.5, it's acceptable. But I would like this to be considered not just a small tweak from 11 to 10.5. And Mayor, if I can finish, I also would like some consideration for the medium and high density, because I'm finding particular very dense, very high, and even if we want to, that's another thing, the fire, we know that the fire department doesn't have capacity for certain heights, and so if we are promoting 20 meters in medium density, and they can go to 16, but they can go to 22, if they provide affordable housing, it's right there. I don't even know if the fire department would have capacity. So I'm just concerned. Yeah, so this is concerns that has to be taken into account as well.
Yeah, I just want to be clear about a number of the concerns you brought up, is that, I mean, on paper, maybe we're saying, oh, up to 8 stories or something, but that does not take precedent when it comes to development. What we know is that if the fire department can't serve 8 stories, that's what takes precedent. We just can't, that's not going to get approved. And the same goes for buildings near creeks and everything. That's environmental assessment would have to happen, and that's going to limit development in those kinds of properties as well. So that's still what takes precedent, regardless of kind of what the zoning says could be possible as a maximum. But I did want to reiterate one of your points just about like what, and I kind of asked that right from the beginning about like why to even the tweak to the 2 or the R2, RL2. Like when it comes to kind of just saying, let's bring this right down to what RL1 is, because it's still 11 meters, I think in some places is what was raised or what's in the presentation from Colton. Is it just a matter of us trying to really meet the province's desires as much as possible, though it's not necessarily the requirements? Is that where we're coming from when we're still trying to keep it at 11 meters, or?
Yeah, certainly, Mayor White. There are a number of factors that kind of play into the height suggestion of 11 meters in RL2. One of them is just the buildability. If not only does the legislation seek to get somewhere between 4 and 6 units, depending on the size of the site, they have to be livable. And so the opportunity to 11 meters allows, livable unit sizes if they're stacked side by side or on top of each other. It also helps you get to the peaked roof sort of typology that we've heard is important in Gibsons, because those roof lines and those roof styles take additional space. So it's really a little bit of a blend of attaining legislation, but also creating livable building forms, and really ensuring that there's flexibility for a variety of housing types and styles within that zone.
Okay, thanks for that answer. That's helpful. I didn't realize that aspect so much, but it does. I think council's had experience with, looking at some of our development proposals on Marine Drive, for example, of trying to cram in a duplex into a property where all the setbacks and everything made it so difficult to do so. So, and we often have to consider numerous variances to do some of these things just to make units livable. You've got a quick question on that, Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Was there any feedback from the community or from the Citizens Assembly that requested higher heights? I'm just, there was so much dialogue around it. I'm just saying, like,
we know the Citizens Assembly definitely did for upper Gibson. Somebody, there was one conversation about 20 stories or something that was just totally impractical. But I think that the point was people were willing to look at higher buildings in Upper Gibsons in the Residents Assembly. We heard that loud and clear.
in upper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Director of Planning.
Thank you. I can add to that through the mayor. There was a recommendation to go up instead of out wide. So bring the buildings up taller so that we could retain landscaping and reduce lot coverage and to allow on-site parking. So that was one of the considerations. And that's what has been brought forward, which is where the 3-story max came from.
Right, and just to follow up, and was that in relation to medium-high density, or was that low?
No, that was general. So I think the way I interpreted it was across small-scale multi-unit housing as well. So rather than spreading it out and keeping it short, going up and having space for landscaping and trees.
So I wanted to ask about a couple specific, this is page 37 of our agenda, of the chart we have. There was a lot D on North Road where the property owner was interested in moving up to medium density, and we're staying at lower. I'm just wondering what our rationale is there when we kind of can look at North Road and go, well, this is when our livable communities work that we looked at earlier. I don't think it was livable, the name of it, but about Upper Gibsons being close to amenities, and it's a good place for more density. It's close to transit, close to schools. A lot of this was kind of the rationale, the council's rationale for supporting 718 North Road for even higher than high density, but it's still going to be high density in this zoning bylaw. Why did we go with no change on that?
I would request, Ms. Stats potentially could speak to that, just because I think she might be familiar with the Lot D reference. I'd need an address.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So what we did is we looked at the area around it, and it is surrounded by small scale, or the low density, the small scale multi-unit housing. And with that new RL2 zone, they do get added density already. So the thought there was, well, let's keep it the same. 718 North Road does have council approval to proceed, so that's why that one is a one-off. But it's definitely something that could be looked at if council wants to increase the density for that site. It is on North Road, so it's a little farther away from the commercial corridor on Gibsons Way. But it's a medium, it's a bit of a larger lot, so they could accommodate some more units in there.
Maybe it's something to keep considering in our tweaking. If we're going to potentially be looking at bringing RL2 down, that's going to affect a lot like this. So perhaps it would, ones this and others that are RL2 and Upper Gibsons we might need another zone, or it might be more appropriate for medium density and just make RL2 more clearly less density. So yeah, that's something to consider, I hope. Then, it might be useful for council to just hear a little more on, it's interesting at 626 Shaw Road, the property owner was interested in lower or medium density. Usually property owners want higher density, and this is one that's at high density, and it says the rationale was the property is surrounded by high and medium density, so why not just meet in the middle and have medium density? I don't know. And I kind of suspect, we need to, I kind of look at these and I anticipate, well, is this developer going to come in with an application for us where they're actually we have to jump through a lot of hoops to downzone a property in a zoning application, and maybe we could just preempt that if that's what is the desire here. That even need to happen? I mean, if they want to just build it lower, can't can they do that anyway if it's zoned high density?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is 626 Shaw Road we're talking about. Yeah, this is an interesting site, and it's a bit of a dilemma because it's got a 3-story townhouse development to the south, and to the north it's got the Soames building, which actually the units start about 3 stories above grade. So it's this interesting challenge where if it were to build at, say, a 2-story height, it would kind of be sunken in relation to the surroundings. So in terms of, we can certainly consider this one and take guidance from council on it. It's an interesting dilemma.
Thanks. And I may just have one more to finish off. No, I don't. Go ahead, Councillor D'Andrade.
It's just clarification on this topic. Why did the staff mention 2 floors? I don't understand. I thought that medium was 4 floors.
Sorry, through you, Mayor, I might defer to Colton. Is medium 4 floors? Oh, they're currently, I think the issue is that we had it designated as, high density. And, medium would fit in the middle. I think what it is that we might have heard a suggestion of low density from an inquiry. So there's all the options on the table.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, low density there, I don't think, but that's not, okay, that clarifies it. Do we have any other questions on the report? I mean, this is a work in progress, as we hear, we're still looking at changes. Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you. We heard about all zones, but so what's happening with the comprehensive development zone? Because I see here on my draft, and I'm assuming there has not been any change from what it is. So what is the status? And where are we going with that? Because I heard about height in Lower Gibsons, and right now.
So I believe that was covered at a prior meeting when we were looking at OCP designations. And so what has happened there is the CDA site is proposed to be zoned mixed-use commercial, Lower Gibsons. So it would have the same height requirements as the other commercial sites in Lower Gibsons.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, and we've got a recommendation on this, I believe. So, I mean, I think what I've heard from council is I'm not hearing any opposition to the actual changes that are proposed here. It's just we're continuing to bring up more changes, and they're not a surprise to staff and to Colton. They're changes that are already being looked at in this iterative process. So can we make the recommendation for the zoning bylaw changes that are on record in this agenda for now? I will move that. I'm not sensing that there's any opposition to this here. Councillor Thompson? Okay, Councillor Thompson moves it.
Are you seconding? I can second it.
Okay, Councillor D'Andrade seconds it, and you've got a comment on the motion or an amendment?
Well, I just want to, because here it doesn't talk about specifically about the discussion. So if we say yes to this, what does it mean? Are we making another recommendation and that the other aspect that has been discussed here would be incorporated into the new draft?
Yeah, it's hard because we don't have we're giving staff some we've given staff some general concerns here, but we're not in a position to go, well, this is exactly what the height should be. It's something that they have to go back with and work on, right? I don't know what does staff take from this discussion. I'll put it that way.
Thank you. This gives us the go-ahead to make some of these changes in the zoning, and also to analyze them when we do the view model. So when we come back to council, we'll have these changes incorporated in the zoning bylaw, and we can model it. So then we can look at it again at that point and discuss the height, the appropriate heights across Gibsons.
Okay, so the discussion is ample to, you've been taking notes, and we don't need to try to get it all into a actual motion, is what I'm hearing.
I took a lot of notes, and if there's a change in direction that you want us to act on right now, it would be helpful to get a resolution on that. Because I have a bunch of notes, but they're all from all of you as individuals.
Okay. Councillor D'Andretti?
I just want to be clear that the concern with heights of low R2 has been heard, and that's I think one of the big things. I'm also concerned with heights with even the other medium and high development. So I would like this to be looked as well, because just with the amount of sites that we are allowing medium density, we're going to bring so many people and high density. So I don't know, if we want to keep the atmosphere, do we need to go that high? Do we need to go that dense? I think that these are questions that we need
Councillor
to.
D'Andretti, I just think especially in consideration to the fact we have two councillors who aren't here, I think we should probably consider that's a big reason why we're doing this view modeling, is to look at what it's actually going to look like. So I think, there are a couple notes here about some of the considerations here to be deferred until we actually see some of the view modeling. So I think particularly when we're talking about the higher, medium, and high buildings, we should defer that until then and see what it actually looks like, because that was the whole concept, right? But I do think there's a strong consensus here on the lower scale, the smaller scale buildings continuing to be with the present character of the town as much as possible. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you for that, because I also like the fact that the comparative of current to presented was also communicated. So I think I feel confident that covers a reflection of where it would stay. So thank you.
So if we've got that confidence, can we vote? Good. Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation? The recommendation passes. And before we go to parking strategy, I'm just hoping we can have a short break. 3 minutes, which might extend to 4. Parking strategy. I'll go to the planning department to report on that. It's item 4.2.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I'm excited to be able to introduce this parking strategy report, which staff in the planning, infrastructure, and bylaw enforcement departments have been working toward for more than a year with our consultant Urban Systems. We have Niraj Sunawar with us. He's a parking engineer and project lead from Urban Systems, and he'll present a high-level summary of the parking strategy report. First, I'll just share a bit of context to this report and note staff's requests for council direction that are on page 5 of the staff report. So the parking strategy review project was funded last year through the Housing Accelerator Fund. The town undertook the study to respond to several challenges around parking, including increased parking variance requests, growing competition for curbside space, seasonal demand pressures, and new provincial housing legislation that affects how we plan for parking on-site. The parking strategy isn't a fixed-in-time singular plan, I just want to be clear, which might have fit into a smaller report. Rather, it's a flexible toolkit that will guide how the town manages on and off-street parking over time. It's based on local data, policy review, and best practices from comparable municipalities and innovative strategies from larger municipalities, with the goals of supporting housing diversity, accessibility, and efficient use of land as the town's needs and context evolve. So staff look forward to using it as to guide proposals and policy in the near future and also over the long term. Staff are asking council to consider 3 key directions this afternoon. First is to endorse the parking strategy as a guiding document. To direct staff, this is secondly, to direct staff to incorporate the recommended on-site parking rates and design standards into the upcoming zoning bylaw update, or into the draft zoning bylaw for review along with that document. That staff bring forward other curbside and policy options, such as time limits, residential permits, or potentially paid parking for council's future consideration in response to specific challenges. So I'll turn it over to Niraj, and we'll both be available for any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Mayor Council. Before I begin, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of Squamish Nation that we're all gathered today. My name is Niraj Sunawar, as Kristen mentioned. I'm a transportation engineer with Urban Systems, and I've had the pleasure of working with the town on this exciting project for over a year. And the purpose of the project was to identify and evaluate the parking management strategy and policy options. And this was to address and mitigate not only the existing parking challenges that the town is facing, but also looking into the future needs and the growth of Gibsons. So the key outcomes from this strategy were two of them here. The first one is the off-street parking strategies that would support the zoning bylaw update, as well as supporting policies. And these are ensuring that appropriate and desirable parking outcomes are achieved through the land development. And the second one is around the on-street parking management strategies. And this is guiding the decision-making as well as the implementation for publicly provided parking. And this includes a various amount of items, but primarily this is residential and public parking, parking pricing, sustainable transportation, and as well as accessibility. So these are various topics that have been looked at, but the recommendation has been formed into 2 major parts, off-street and on-street. And in terms of the overview of the entire project and the strategies, the way the project was completed, the first and foremost is the approach is guided by the policy and regulations set at the local, regional, as well as the provincial levels. And this is kind of establishing the direction for the future growth. And that included some of these guiding documents that I've listed in here, which is the current as well as the draft official community plan, council strategic plan, active transportation network plan, as well as the draft Sunshine Coast accessibility plan. So once we looked into these guiding policies, we went into looking into a data-driven approach. So for that, the local data included the ICBC vehicle ownership data, enforcement data, the variance requests were reviewed as well, and the parking utilization to look into the on-street parking measures. And to inform, at a second level to that was the some of the best practices that we've seen from other municipalities, and these were ranging from what has been done and tested all the way to all the innovative approaches that are out there currently. So we've included the zoning bylaw comparison in here, updated design guidelines for a majority of the parking items under regulations. Pilot programs that have been successful locally as well as regionally in Canada, as well as ongoing management practices that we've seen and has been included as examples in the report as case studies that the town can reference and before looking to implement, be able to take a look at. So within the report, there are a total of 44 strategies. And like I mentioned before, the way that it has been structured, for the off-street parking strategies, there are 4 major themes, and under those 4 themes, there are 20 strategies. Under the on-street parking strategies, there are 9 different themes and a total of 24 strategies. So it is included in the attached report, but through this presentation, I'm gonna go over the highlights of some of those strategies and primarily focus on what the guiding principles were when we were developing these strategies, what they intend to do, and list some of the key strategies out of those, each item. We'll begin with the off-street parking strategies. So the guiding principle for the off-street parking strategies were aligning the parking regulations with the OCP directions and the development trends that we're seeing, addressing the land use, sustainability, and affordability objectives, requiring the right amount of parking, and reducing the need for the parking variance requests that we've been seeing for a while in the town, and clarifying the expectations for the town, residents, and development community as it pertains to the on-site parking. So the status quo and the conventional practice and standards around parking generally we've seen could result in excessive supply in terms of parking spaces, increased housing and construction cost, as well as greater reliance in cars. So when we look at those conventional approaches, what we've aimed to do with development of some of these strategies in here for consideration, they influence the efficient land use, and they provide transportation options for residents and visitors, as well as shape future development. So these strategies are all aiming to do that through the on-site parking. What is included in these off-street parking strategies? The 4 major themes in here you can see are vehicle parking, loading, bicycle non-vehicular parking, and transportation demand management. So within this, like I mentioned before, there are 20 strategies, and they're all intended to be adaptable and actionable. And as staff mentioned, a lot of this will be done through the adopting the recommendations in the zoning bylaw update. The key strategies in here I've listed on the right side: revising the residential vehicle parking supply rates, updating the electrical vehicle and accessible parking requirements and providing design guidelines, updating design standards for bicycle parking spaces, and considering development mobility scooter requirements. And within the strategy themes, a majority of this is addressing vehicle parking, but there's also some of the loading requirements, as well as the on-site design standards that we would like also to update through this. And then for the bicycle parking that is not listed here but is in the report is introduction for the end-of-trip amenities like washroom, lockers, and showers, that being part of the requirements, as well as providing design guidelines for them as well. When we look into the transportation demand management, some of these strategies include requiring car share, which currently is in the bylaw, but some additional strategies to really encourage more of those shared mobility within the town, as well as amendment to the cash in lieu policy to deal with some of the inability to provide the on-site parking spaces in challenging environment. So again, there are 20 of these strategies, but these are some of the key ones that I've highlighted for the off-street parking. When we look into the on-street parking strategies, the guiding principles here, we're aligning with the town policies and reflecting the local context, supporting the growth while balancing curb use like tree planting and active transportation, managing the seasonal parking shortages driven by tourism peaks, creating flexibility for different users at different times, improve monitoring and enforcement of curb use, and coordinating change with clear communication and collaboration with partners and public. With the on-street parking, without active management of parking, which we've seen in the past, it does lead towards over-reliance on those curbside parking space, and ultimately the on-street parking space can become congested very quickly. But in order to address that, the aim through some of these on-street parking strategies is to improve the turnover, reducing the parking pressure, as well as better matching the supply with the demand. So that's where, one of the things that the on-street parking management has to deal with is the limited supply. The curbside space that we have in the town, it is going to be limited, but with the growing demand and competing needs, we need to manage that to be able to match the demand. So this is what the on-street parking strategies is aiming to do. And the concept around the on-street parking strategies, what we have listed over here are the different curbside functions. So as I mentioned, the curb is like limited and valuable resource used by various users, but it is a space with competing needs, but sometimes also with complementary needs. And when we looked at the current use, as well as the emerging trends, these are the 5 curbside functions that we could identify for town of Gibsons. And this has been seen in many other communities as well as part of the curbside management strategies, is defining some of the functions which provides you with a guidance and a framework for making decisions on what best use of the curbside space is for. So if we look into this, the 5 major groups, we have access for people, under which there are various things like pedestrian facilities, transit facilities, cycling, accessible parking, micromobility, and passenger pickup and drop off. And there are others like that here with activation and placemaking, access for goods, short-term parking, and general parking. So although we have defined the curbside functions into these 5 categories, within the town, there may be different places, even within a small area, that could have different priority for curbside functions. And what this does is when we are making decision on what that space is most utilized, we can take a look at some of these functions, and within the functions, we can take a look at the use and decide this is what the curb use should be prioritized for. As an example, we can take a look at, we can pick one of the use from the curbside function, such as the access for goods, which includes the local commercial and deliveries and loading. So that could be competing with some of the other uses like the general parking, regulated and unregulated parking. So depending on where you're at, you're going to be looking at these functions and deciding what you're going to set aside that use for. So this was an important a deliverable out of this report that we've utilized for the rest of the on-street parking strategies. So under this, we have 9 themes, as I had mentioned, includes the residential parking, public parking, parking pricing, loading and delivery, accessible parking, sustainable transportation, activation placemaking, engagement, education and awareness, staffing and monitoring. As mentioned, there are 24 strategies under these 9 themes. What I had presented earlier about the curbside function, in the report, what we have tried to do is under each strategy, we have tried to identify which curbside functions do they affect, and also identified in which geographical areas they're most implementable. Also the cost, high-level cost, as well as resources required for implementation, and mentioned earlier case studies that the town can look into before implementation of these strategies. So without going into all of the different strategies, some of the key ones in this one were the modifying the on-street parking time limitations within the town, or in particular Gibsons Landing. We are also providing some thresholds for parking utilization that can be used by the staff to implement new regulations and monitor the changes. Improving the supply of public parking for visitors in Gibsons Landing, including when to consider paid parking, and ways to expand sustainable transportation like public bike parking, electrical vehicle charging, as well as car share. So with the strategies, like we mentioned, the document serves as a toolkit to make decisions for implementation. In terms of implementing the off-street parking strategies, through the endorsement of this report, as well as direction from the council, the off-street parking strategies can be implemented by applying the parking rates and regulation recommendations in the zoning bylaw update. And these will include updating the parking rates, as well as some of the way that the parking rates are structured in the bylaw requirement. And this will be for the vehicles, as well as bicycle loading and transportation demand management. It will also include some design guidelines for these parking, including the vehicle parking, loading, and bicycle parking. As for the on-street parking strategies, there are a lot that we can choose from in terms of how we manage the parking spaces. But first and foremost, it requires careful consideration before implementation, understanding what it is that we're actually trying to address and solve. So there will be some more work required in order to implement some of these to be successful. And what we're highlighting in some of these strategies in terms of the resource required and how success can be had with some of this implementation is through future public and stakeholder engagement, infrastructure and investment into infrastructure and technology, and then looking into the funding and staffing to implement. What we've seen in a lot of the municipalities is that implementing some of these curbside policies without investing into some of these funding as well as staffing or infrastructure, that has led to like unsuccessful results and also public frustration. So these are the steps we're saying is very important to consider before we implement it. And as Kirsten mentioned, we're not providing this document as something that you can go and implement right away, but look into some of the issues that as the town is growing, what we need to address and come back with the resources required for implementation before considering something more innovative for the town. So in summary, like the strategy presents a forward-looking and holistic approach to address evolving parking and mobility needs within the community. And what we have aimed to do when developing some of these strategies is to balance accessibility, sustainability, and livability of the community. And again, like to reiterate, the successful implementation relies on careful consideration of what parking challenges that we're trying to solve, but at the same time balance the needs between the policy directions versus managing the parking demands. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me and open the floor for questions.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. It's a very thorough and in-depth package that we've been waiting for quite some time. And it requires careful consideration. With that said, I'm wondering what is the feasibility of doing a workshop that we could dive into this deeper? Because to me, we've got some work here to do.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, although a lot of this is very high level, is what I find too. So, and I appreciate you've acknowledged that quote, more work required, future public engagement. It sounds like this is just the tip of the iceberg, really. I guess so accepting it as a guideline seems reasonable to me. But I guess, I mean, my main question though is, when I look at the staff report, and it says that staff be directed to apply the on-site parking rates and regulation recommendations, I don't see those in the staff report. And I guess the on-street parking management approaches be assessed, that's still kind of general in the guideline piece, but the second refers to something very specific, and I don't actually see that in the staff report, those specifics. So what are those specifics that we would be endorsing here? Because the rest seems pretty general, and I mean, and we could still have a workshop at some point in the future to talk about how this is actually might look, like the more work required piece. But yeah, what about those more specific
Thank you,
pieces?
Mayor. Those are, I might have given a page reference in that bit of the report, but they're on page 23 of the parking strategy. They're outlined in tables. And these are, I mean, Niraj is actively actually working alongside this report to provide a draft of minimum parking requirements for different uses in the zoning bylaw that will be put, with your direction, put into the draft zoning bylaw for review along with the rest of the document. So the idea would be, there's a lot of tweaks to update and make the regulations more usable, as well as to balance those on-site uses. Niraj would be able to speak to the specific numbers if you're interested, but there's also time to discuss them further.
Yeah, I think we should dig into that as much as we can here, because that's really what otherwise we're looking at a fairly general discussion paper for reference that we can continue to discuss over in the future, which is what we'd be endorsing for the other pieces. But for this, it's actually some hard numbers, and what does that look like is important.
If I may, Mayor, I should just correct it. It's on page 22 and 23.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, 22. It starts on 22 with a chart. Yeah. So I don't know if councillors took notes on these two pages, and they weren't in that presentation. Really the numbers, right? The hard numbers. I think that's important for us to go over here. Okay, there it is. In the Councillor DeAndrade, do you have some notes or questions on those?
Actually, I just have a general question regarding the timeline. and how the public will be engaged, getting, and obviously the strategy is great, thank you. It's very comprehensive, but it's a strategy, right? So I see the draft new zoning bylaw has some already material, and then there's the XX, which is to be filled up. So I'm just trying to understand where we're going to discuss, because it's not just a mere opinion, what I think, there's expertise behind that. So there's a talk about public engagement. So there's something also that we have to better understand to support. And I'm talking about the implementation. I think council won't have any problem endorsing the strategy. But I'm just having difficulty in understanding this process, given the short timeline that we have and how the public will be engaged in a meaningful way as well.
Well, I think the public would need to be engaged on any, if we are to go ahead with any of the possible directions that are discussed extensively in this report. That's what the public engagement piece is referring to, I think. But that's not what we're looking at on pages 22 and 23 are really, these are in direct support of the zoning bylaw, right? These are what we need to move the zoning bylaw forward. And we have had, as was mentioned by Colton, we have had input in the zoning bylaw on parking. There has been public engagement on that throughout. So I guess, but we didn't ask Urban Systems to do our OCP and zoning bylaw process. So I'll look to staff to just say, how do these numbers, these recommendations in table 5.2 and table 5.3 align with the kind of input we've received on our zoning bylaw so far. That's kind of what you're asking, really. We've done the engagement on parking, so.
Sorry, thank you,
Yeah.
Mayor. I can attempt to answer that. We've been running parallel processes, so it's pulling this all together is an iterative process. But the rates, I guess, overall, and Niraj can correct me if I get anything wrong, but the rates overall, especially for residential uses, would be lowered because our current rates in the zoning bylaw are generally recognized over and over in any parking studies we've had as too high and providing an oversupply and being restrictive to being able to develop housing, for example, on the land that's provided. So this also looks at specifically the SMU zoning, which is the infill development on lower density lots. Currently, we require 2 spaces per dwelling unit on those sites. And so this would propose a lower rate depending on the number of units, recognizing that if you're developing for smaller units instead of one larger unit, it might be for smaller families and you might have lower requirements. Also, there's non-residential vehicle supply rate changes, and these are for the commercial uses and so on. Currently, we have some rates that just haven't made sense over the years and have needed adjustment. The rates that have been provided are based on observed needs in other places and in Gibsons, and it generally aligns the uses with one another, so that if you're changing from one use to another, like office use to a restaurant use, for example, there might be a change, but it's just easier to manage those differences. They're closer requirements for different uses that might come into a unit. I don't know if Niraj wants to add any comments.
I think I can add to that. And hearing about the zoning bylaw process and what you've heard from the community surrounding the parking requirement, one thing we've heard today is that the general feedback that was received is to not change the parking regulations. And that was certainly one of the options that we provided in the strategy. There were three options in particular for the residential parking. And that could be, one would be status quo. You maintain whatever the parking requirement there is today. But what we've seen from the local data is what the staff mentioned around the number of parking variants you're receiving. And that is because the zoning bylaw is not up to date with the community and the data that we've seen from other locations. So there's a lot of parking studies and parking data that is collected in Metro Vancouver. They look into the impacts of some of the different tenures of housing, for example, the sizes of bedrooms, as well as different locations, how close they are to transit and things like that. So what we've seen from these studies is that the way that the current parking bylaw requirement are structured and the rates that are provided, if the status quo were to be remain, you would continue to see these parking variance requests as new developments occur. So you're modernizing your bylaw requirement by reducing the parking requirements that it is in the current bylaw, as well as restructuring your bylaw parking requirement. The biggest recommendations, that's coming out of the this particular strategy in the table 5.2 and 5.3, is aligning it to your local context, as well as similar communities where we've done a scan of the zoning bylaw requirements. And these are the communities that have recently also done similar updates in their zoning bylaw requirement and have included some of the rates that you've seen here. An example would be school bylaw parking requirement for schools. Currently, it does not distinguish the type of schools in the town's requirement. If we split between elementary school and secondary school, there's a big difference between the amount of parking required. So those are the type of distinction that we're trying to create by introducing some of these new rates and structure in the zoning bylaw. And as it pertains to the residential, you will see the structure to that is more around the different tenures of house. So this is for the multifamily. You can see we've clearly identified for townhouse, rental, affordable, and any other multiple dwellings would fall under that new category over there. And then on the right-hand side, there is less than 45 square meters and larger than 45 square meters. Again, these pertain to the studio size units in the multifamily developments, which have generally shown to have lower parking requirement, whereas when you get into the 2 to 3 bedroom or plus, we see some of those higher parking requirements, and we're addressing that through here. And then adding the parking requirements separately for visitors, because that's also something we've heard is if you don't have that in your bylaw, there is no incentive for developers to provide those visitor parking spaces separately. Whereas we've heard from public that this is through other communities as well, that visitor parking is something that on-site visitor parking is something that they would really like to continue to see as on-street parking spaces become less and less available. And this is why we're also adding that visitor parking requirement separately into the bylaw. So those will be the major changes as we implement this table and the table 5.3 into the zoning bylaw requirement.
Okay, so now that we have it clear what we're actually talking about in the staff report, I feel like it's easy for me to support this, going ahead with this, just because it's been just an ongoing chronic frustration, and I appreciate some serious work has gone into looking at what the situation is on the ground, and the chronic frustration is that our current zoning bylaw, our parking requirements are just tremendously out of date and irrelevant to kind of all the different uses that we now have in the town. So I appreciate that this work has been done. So I'm more comfortable with kind of moving ahead with this and then getting getting input from the rest of council, because once it's kind of in the draft zoning bylaw, then we can continue to get input from the rest of council and from the public, including public hearing as we move forward. Councillor D'Andrade. Oh, sorry, I think I had Councillor Thompson first. Yeah.
Okay,
This is a meeting.
yeah, I understand that. I guess the suggestion or the recommendation is that we would look at what's being presented here and then it goes into discussion, correct? Because I don't know.
It goes into the draft zoning bylaw.
Right.
And that's up. We haven't seen first reading of that, right? So
Right.
it's
So there's, everything that's presented here is very logical. What concerns me, and, I've said this a lot in council, and especially because of the parking variances that have been presented to us, you're totally right with that, is when I look at our community and I look at who, mill workers, home care workers, hospital workers, the amount of people in our community that I feel require vehicles to do their jobs. And we do not have transit capacity to support pretty much every one of those careers that I just mentioned. I have a real concern with one space for up to 3 dwelling units. So I just want to table that because this looks significantly reduced for this councillor's comfort zone.
okay. Councillor D'Andrade.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's one of the points I was going to make. We have different streets here. Some have culverts, and there's an example of a house close to where I live, which it's culvert, and they even asked to cover the culvert. The town didn't allow, and now there's 4 vehicles in a townhouse plus a truck. And it's all parked in the street, in the curve, and there has been an accident there. The only reason ICBC doesn't know is because was a young driver and the other driver negotiated, okay, you pay and I'm not gonna, okay, smart up. But so it's a combination of people walking the street with cars. There's no even nice place to park, so the cars are, and then you have, so this is the kind of concern that Councillor Thompson, even though we want people to go and get transit in a beautiful, perfect world, we are not Vancouver. And then you ended up with these situations in the everyday that is dangerous. I hope there's no accident, but it is quite dangerous. And once in a while, and I come super slow because I know the other vehicle could be driving. But I would like, maybe the town can have some different policy for streets that have culvert. So that's my only concern with reducing parking in areas that you cannot even park on the street. And given the reality like Councillor Thompson raised, so that's my concern. In paper looks good, but.
I'll make that more general and just say we absolutely cannot be doing this anticipating that there's just going to be overflow parking in places where there shouldn't be, whether it's a culvert or anything like that's. And I guess maybe that would require enforcement, which is also discussed in this paper. But yeah, I'm not interested in entertaining this going okay, we're going to reduce the parking requirement for the small scale multi-unit, but we'll just hope that those extra cars are going to park at someone else's property or something. That's just not on. I think, but I also think I also want to emphasize these are minimums, right? I feel like a developer who comes along and says, hey, I'm aiming my development for a family that's going to have both adults working and needing vehicles is likely going to want to make sure they have parking for that. Or it's not going to sell, right? It's not in their interest, right?
Municipalities out there that are facing that.
So are they sitting on?
Developments, I mean.
developments that won't sell because the developer has made an unwise decision to not allow enough parking. Well, yeah, I don't know how can we prescribe that to them? I mean, is that something you've experienced in other communities then?
Yeah, I would say when we were considering the options, in particular to the residential parking rates, these were actually the most conservative options that we have presented here, knowing the context for town and looking into the vehicle ownership. So first of all, the rates that we're providing here, they're based on, we've looked into some of the multifamily units in the town, and we've looked into the strata owned townhouses versus apartments, and looked at how many cars ownership is in each, and then come up with an average. And we've used the higher numbers from what we've observed. So that was kind of what we have established in terms of the rates. But in terms of the options, some of the municipalities actually have no requirements for the small scale multifamily. And some of the municipalities actually impose a maximum on the parking. So they do not want to see more parking to reduce that reliance on the cars. Because again, this goes back into meeting parking demands versus the guidelines and the policy that we've set for our community for growth. If we're imagining we're gonna have continuous growth in the community with limited curb space, then on-street parking, for example, is something that we will need to manage. In lower density areas, that might still be a valid concern that they could use the curb space for general parking because there's no other competing needs for it. So you can continue to have those parking. Whereas in other areas like Gibsons Landing, there's a lot of competing needs there. And that's where the management comes into play. The residential, most of the parking demand need to be met on site, meaning the development, when they develop, they need to understand what they're building it for. And that's what we've seen in the affordable housing. Those rates are much lower than some of the market housing. And that's the difference we've seen in other communities as well that has translated. And from the local data, we've seen the townhouses generally higher requirement compared to the apartment buildings. But again, there are other communities, they're pushing the limits where they've done, City of Vancouver, for example, because they have the infrastructure in terms of the active transportation investment and transit, they can implement no parking requirements anywhere, as well as actually in some of the areas that have these rapid transit or requiring a maximum parking requirement, which we cannot do in here, and that's not what we're proposing. We're looking into the vehicle ownership within the town. We're looking at how much we need to grow, how much space we have, how much can we manage our on-street parking, and based on that, an availability of those on-street parking, we're saying these rates make most sense. And what we're saying is, if we do not, for example, if we're not happy with these numbers and we go back to the status quo, what is the rates that are currently, we will continue to see the dependency on the cars, and we may not see the change in the vehicle ownership. So this is going to keep increasing, and we're going to have to on-site parking is one part of the problem where people are owning up the car. Now they are going to be driving to most of these locations where now non-residential parking need to respond to that, and therefore you need higher demands in these commercial areas as well. So it kind of builds on the issues for parking, and because of the space required for these construction as well, affordability is affected, as well as the space for investment into sustainable transportation bikes and car share. These are never going to happen. So there is a decision to be made if we need to follow the policy guidelines from what we're setting, how we're going to grow into the future, then some of these decisions need to happen in terms of regulating the parking. And again, this is still a flexible tool in terms of the requirements. There are particular items around transportation demand management we also want to implement into the zoning bylaw that will, with the partnership with developers, will be able to implement more active transportation and car share, for example.
How are you feeling about the recommendation? Councillor Thompson?
My position is status quo. Especially as it relates to the SMHU.
Okay. And we've got, so I don't know if there's anything we can really pass. Do we want to pass the general acceptance of the guidelines? And I don't know where we go from here. We're missing 2 councillors too. Okay. Staff?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the SSMUH parking requirements. So it's what is being proposed is 1 space per dwelling unit. So for example, if there was a duplex, they would be required 2 parking spaces. Right now, the parking requirement, or a single family would be required 1 parking.
Still, that's not changing.
Sorry?
Sorry, I've been meaning to clarify that single-family dwelling units, if there's only 1 single-family home on a property, there's no proposal to change that parking rate. It would stay at 2. It's where we have infill then what Leslie Ann is addressing.
Okay, so a double duplex, say there's 2 duplexes and there's 4 units on site, then they would be required 3 parking spaces.
4, actually.
Is that right?
4, because it would be rounded up. So you'd need 3 spaces for the first 3 units and 0.75 for the 4th, which rounds up to 4. So it'd be 1 per unit on a 4 units SMU property.
Instead of 6.
Instead of under the current zoning, it would require 8 parking spaces, which is impossible.
Yeah. And let's consider too, we're talking all about houses that haven't even been built yet. And looking at the construction in town, we're not looking at a lot of homes we're probably anticipating compared to existing housing stock. None of the existing housing stock is being asked to change their parking spaces, and once those houses sell, and if they, presumably exist for a long time, those parking spaces aren't going to change. I just want to always keep that perspective because Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you. On that note, so I understand if it's 4, it's 375 goes to 4. What about if it's 5? It will be 4.5. 4.5 becomes 5 or becomes 4?
Good question, through you, Mayor. It always rounds up. So if it's, anywhere under 5 spaces is 5 spaces.
We don't have a quarter space.
Yeah, any fractions of spaces are rounded up to a whole space as a total.
A smart car space, yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, even if it's 5.2, will be 6?
Through you, Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Can we just run through, just so I can write it out, and I've got a clear understanding of just 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you just do that for me, please?
Yes, I can do my best. So this is for in the low-density residential zones, at the small-scale multi-unit residential, or actually any low-density zones. If there's only 1 home on the property, the requirement would be 2 spaces. If you have a duplex, or you have a home and a garden suite, or a home and a secondary suite, or 2 single-family homes, these would require 1 space for each of the dwelling units, so a total of 2. If you had 3 units, say a duplex plus a garden suite, it would be 3 units. 3 parking spaces, thank you. And if you had 4 units, say in Leslie Ann's example, 2 duplexes, that would be a requirement of 3.75 spaces, which rounds up to 4. Then we get into on some lots, if they're larger, over 1 hectare, then we have a density in the zoning bylaw draft of, I think it's 50 units per hectare. And so where there's a full development with multiple units on a larger lot, for example, the minimum requirement is 0.75 spaces per dwelling unit. So this could be lower. They could build them higher, again, as the mayor pointed out, based on demand.
Just a clarification. So the math that you mentioned, 5.2 becomes 6. So when I see rental 0.9, I mean, unless it's 900 or whatever, a big number, it would make a difference of 1 or 2, but otherwise it would be pretty much negligible. Unless you're talking about 30 units, 40 units, and so on.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, that's generally the 0.9 would come into play if you're looking at an apartment building, for example, that has, if it had 100 units, you'd only need 90 parking spaces, only.
So, I mean, we've got this zoning bylaw process that needs to move forward. So, I mean, if I'm hearing support from the council on the status quo, does that mean I'll just make sure our planning department's hearing me on this question, because does that mean that if council wants a status quo, does that mean that our what I'm gonna call our outdated numbers from the previous, that'll just go into the new zoning bylaw and we'll disregard these recommendations?
That would be that would be
okay.
what that would mean.
Well, I just want to make that crystal clear to council, and we'll be looking at parking variances on every single development that comes up again. So who wants to talk on that? Because I'm okay with this as a framework moving forward that may change, maybe tweaked, and Councilor DeAndrade.
I was going to support the lowered minimum in selected areas. And the selected area, very careful study to understand the impact. So at least we are moving forward. But the table that we just discussed remains the same? Is it?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I think, yes, the report has these recommendations. What we implement is on the table. I think also that option to have adjusted rates in different areas is something that can be considered. A challenge we've found in the discussions with urban systems is that a recommendation might be, for example, where there's lower on-street availability, you might have a higher on-site parking rate, but it happens in Gibsons that in the lower Gibsons commercial area, for example, we have less opportunity for on-site parking and a lower on-street availability. So those two sort of objectives conflict and sort of put us back at, okay, maybe we need to lean on cash in lieu, responding to certain sites and options like that, or demand management options.
Yeah, it's so complex, just kind of thinking about even new development that's happening now and the people who are looking to move to Gibsons now, and in 10 years and in 20 years and looking into the future. And I guess, when I can share one conversation I had this morning with YMCA is they on childcare, which is an ongoing issue every day on that, the advocacy for our childcare problem. Their current employees, and these are the people we need on the Sunshine Coast, as people to work in childcare and healthcare desperately. One of probably the biggest hang-up that came in this morning in my conversation is there isn't enough bus service in West Sechelt. So those people aren't looking to come to the Sunshine Coast to work in childcare with cars. They need more bus service. And all I could say was, well, at least it's increasing the route in West Sechelt is the top priority for the regional district right now. So hopefully it's coming in a year or two. It'll be in the next budget process, I hope. But it's just like, the reason I'm bringing this up is that I think when we're looking in the future, I mean, we're looking sure now, A lot of these homes are going to continue to exist with enough parking for 4 vehicles for a single-family home. There's lots like that. I think when we're looking to the future, and we're going to have to need more transit. We all know this, and that's what a lot of the newer generation currently in the workforce and currently at post-secondary, currently in secondary, my kids, they're going to be looking for transit and active transportation options, and as it's been brought up here by our consultant. So I think that's something we really need to put our minds to too. It's not like we're transforming Gibsons overnight. The Gibsons we see around us, this is trying to look to the future, and as new development comes here, how do we want that to look, and who are the people who are going to be moving into that new development? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. My status quo opinion is changing because of the correction on my interpretation of the numbers. I just want to add that comparative tables are really helpful. It's really, when we've got so many pages to work through, sometimes it's so easy for you guys. It's complicated on this end, so it does help. And so in talking this through, I changed my opinion on having a better understanding of what is actually being proposed, so.
Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. Cash in lieu, I think in theory is a great option. But for example, what I understand, the same way we went through affordable housing, suddenly we are collecting so little, and it really didn't build affordable house. Maybe built a little bit, but not enough. So I understand that parking is a fortune to build a new parking lot. So, and depends where it is, could be even more expensive, right? Depends. So I wonder if the cash in lieu, which it might solve certain problems, but how we're going to get the figures right in order that we can really get an alternative parking or another car share or something that is really meaningful instead of just like, okay, let's have this rate, but what do we do with this money? Are we accumulating in order to address in the future, or will be one by one? Well, that's why I think it's important to, and I don't have the answer, but hopefully staff has.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. For cash in lieu, the options, there are 2 major ones through Local Government Act. One is allocating the reserve fund that you can use to build the off-street parking spaces. So that's number 1. Number 2 is you have the flexibility of using that for alternative transportation options, which is investment into active transportation or transit, or the definition is alternate transportation. So so some of the communities, they have faced that where building a public parking facility is challenging, and therefore you can allocate the reserve fund more towards investment into those infrastructure, including car share. So one of the strategies that we've also provided is working with the private development when they do provide off-street parking, maybe securing some off-street public parking in those developments as well, if the space allows, and using the fund to pay for those. So there are options like that in order to be funding and expanding the public parking, and that's why we're saying we need to amend the cash in lieu in town so that we only address those particular areas where those public parking is required, and not have it town-wide, so that anywhere people are able to just provide cash in terms of when they feel like they don't need to provide parking. So if we amend it, we can utilize those funds towards the alternate transportation options, for example, providing those public parking spaces in private developments. But they also require development agreements and partnership.
Okay, so with that answer and talking about the requirements, the rates, are we ready to move forward with the recommendation? I also like the idea of having some kind of workshop in the future on the bigger picture, the whole report and all the options in there. So I don't know if it's something well, really what we need for the zoning bylaw process is the second part of this recommendation, I think. But, so I don't know if we need an urgent timeline on that workshop or if it's something to look at down the road. Yeah.
You can pass a resolution to hold a workshop on the parking strategy, and then we can come back with
Okay.
dates and do that in the future.
Okay, so can we add that to the recommendation? Are you okay with putting forward the recommendation with that addition? Yeah. Councillor DeAndrade? Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the first one is that council endorses the Town of Gibson's parking strategy report as a flexible toolkit and framework to assist the town to identify, evaluate, and prioritize management strategies and policy options for addressing parking needs as the town evolves, and that staff be directed to apply the on-site parking rates and regulations recommendations in the Town of Gibson parking strategy as zoning bylaw regulation. I don't know if we are doing that.
Yeah,
Are we-
that's, so that,
Oh,
I
that's
know
the
this was the
table.
confusing
No,
piece that I
that's
brought up. Yes.
that's the table, okay,
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
And further, that future on-street parking management approaches be assessed with the parking strategy and brought back to council for consideration prior to implementation. And that we hold a workshop soon.
Well, as per, I think we need to feel out soon based on the zoning
Yeah.
bylaw and all the other stuff that's going on. But
To,
what was your wording? Sorry, I was trying to jump right.
I don't remember. My thought process was, let's separate the rest of the strategy from the off-street parking requirements. So we can now put this this into the zoning bylaw, but then after that, we can set up a workshop to go over the strategy and some ideas.
I don't really want to do it soon because our schedule's so packed.
Great, thank you.
But let's do it, yeah. So that works? Okay. So that's moved, works for Councillor Thompson. Any further discussion, Councillor DeAndrade?
just a clarification, the table that initially Councilor Thompson said status quo, and then there's the other option, the other two options, are we voting on this today as well?
Yeah, could we actually put the wording of that into this motion, just for clarity, for special people from the public, maybe looking at our minutes, like, as per,
Okay,
in the Gibbs,
so,
yeah, I don't know where it would be, but we just need brackets as,
so after Town of Gibson's parking strategy on pages 22 and 23.
yeah, table, let's say the actual tables.
Yeah, and maybe instead of apply, incorporate the on-site parking rates and regulation recommendations in table 5.2 and 5.3 of the parking strategy
Okay,
into the zoning bylaw regulation.
Okay, yeah,
Draft
thanks.
zoning bylaw regulation.
okay, I think that should clarify it. Any further discussion? All those in favor? The motion carries, and I think we will be recessing this meeting because we've got other people coming from the Committee of the Whole. So we'll be recessing this special council meeting until after the Committee of the Whole is finished. That makes sense to everybody? That work?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
You're learning a lot about the OCP and zoning bylaw, which is important. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly have to move over.